That's a good question. What are the top three priorities of my role? And when I'm working with a client in kind of like a leadership capacity, I kind of think of three main things at the moment. The first one is really around how can we provide additional capabilities to the organisation in forms of revising the IT strategy or third-party vendor management, or really in being able to bring forth things that they're not currently doing. So that way they're building on what they've currently got as opposed to being just sort of tweaking what's already in existence. Because I do find with a lot of organisations they spend a lot of time just focusing on the sort of capabilities they've currently got in place, but not really thinking about how they're going to grow themselves going forwards. And that's really the key thing with IT. It's looking at how can we make things work even better? How can we automate other business functions? How can we bring out new product lines? How can we have a key effect on that bottom line? The second thing that I think is kind of important when we're thinking about how we deal with strategy inside organisations is really looking at the security. I mean, there is an increased focus on security at the moment, and by putting in place modern processes and practices, it'll help secure the data that's inside the organisation. But it's also about actually widening this, because security is much bigger than just IT though, and so it means educating the whole company in the best practice and in information governance. And a third thing that I think would be how can we drive up the service levels of IT while still being able to maintain the great quality service and also reducing costs. And I think that's really the magic bullet that many people are looking for, is how can we improve what everyone's retaining but reduce the costs in doing so. That's a great question, and I think that the role that had the biggest impact on my career would be the divestments of Bupa hospitals to become Spire Healthcare. And this was probably a pivotal role for me, because it's where I really transitioned from being a technology delivery agent into actually becoming a technology leader. This was a year-long project with high stakes for everybody involved, from the credibility of this newly created hospital group to potential financial losses for the firm or for the venture capitalists who I was working for, right up to potential of loss of life or other serious medical impacts if things had gone wrong. So back in 2006, this was pioneering work we were doing in the early days of the private cloud, but when we pulled it off, it was providing great service for patients and consultants alike, and I was really, really proud to come through and bring it in on time and under budget for such a transformative piece of work. I think I can see the role of technology leaders changing, because we all know that keeping the lights on is no longer enough, and the pace of change, as we're seeing, is accelerating. So the only constant of change has changed itself. Is now the only constant is really the acceleration of change. So if you think back, major transformations used to occur every 5 years, yet now most organisations I'm working with, I find they're having these come yearly, or with even less time than that. So we need to be aware of this in our role in driving the business forwards through the delivery of new capabilities. So we almost change the story from being lights on as being the norm to transform as being the norm. So when you consider the pace of change that consumerisation of IT is bringing to everybody, it's making every armchair dweller an IT expert. And the role is only going to get more difficult because of this. Because as organisations still try to cling on to what they have before, these are becoming more dated methods of working, more harder for getting the results they're looking for. And really we start looking at things like digital transformation and how that's affecting organisations and really bringing that challenge back to them. It kind of means that our role has to change as digital leaders. We're no longer becoming the happy place of having a mandate for everything. I think in some cases we just have to bite the bullet and take the risks and lead things through that change. So I believe there's two important issues that are confronting the technology industry today. The first one is the belief that everyone can do anything, and technology leaders need to understand of what's actually really going on inside the organisation, because we'll end up getting caught out with the fact that there'll be more fragmented solutions in place, there'll be things getting done in corners which shouldn't be done, and there's no visibility to these. And what it'll mean is that it doesn't end up driving the company forwards, but actually holds them back. as it ends up costing more time, more money, and in fact a lot higher degree of lost opportunities, and potentially a lot higher risk, because when these little solutions are created in various different corridors of the organisation, and it's not visible from a IT point of view, or a risk point of view, or even a data management point of view, then when something goes wrong, something's lost, something's attacked, etc., we could end up being in a bigger problem or a bigger situation. The second thing that I think we all need to recognise is actually that increasing risk from a security potential. We all know now that it's not a case of if we're ever going to get hacked, it's a case of when we're going to get hacked. And that whole change of approach means that we need to change the mindset, not just from the technology perspective, but across the entire firm. And if you've gone through and read a lot of the security materials or the ISO materials, you'll actually realise that you are contractually liable for any data loss. And this can mean that those fragmenting technology architectures, those solutions that you've produced, are creating these little tiny pockets, these little data islands all over the place with no centralised control. And getting this wrong could mean that you end up losing information, and then you can end up paying a significant penalty. And I think this is starting to be really seen as we see things like GDPR come into effect and other EU regulations around this. There's so many great things happening in technology. I just love it. It's one of the key reasons why I stay in the field. But for me, I think the two biggest things that happen at the moment are around IoT, so the Internet of Things, and 3D printing, and that whole small-scale manufacturing. These are things that are really starting to catch my imagination in what they can do. So, despite the whole rhetoric that people are going to have job losses, or there's going to be a downfall in the human race as we know it, if there's the rise of machines and this, that and the other, I actually firmly believe that as technologists we should be looking and encouraging a more utopian view of the future, not this dystopian one. Everybody can find problems, everybody can find risks, but it's going to take people, it's going to take real technology champions and leaders to really push it forward and actually make the changes and strive to get things better, and making sure that we're putting those fundamental controls in place so we don't put ourselves too much at risk. So my gut feeling is that these technologies are just a stepping stone into the future, and a way of encouraging others to think big and make a bigger difference in the world. That's a really good question, and I think that obviously it's very hard to answer from a global perspective. But I think if I was looking specifically at 2 or 3 of my clients I'm working with at the moment, I would probably say that Microsoft Azure and the tooling that goes around it, and things like the Office 365, etc., is really starting to make a big difference. I think as small, medium-sized global organisations are really starting to leverage this, because they don't have money to burn. Every single pound counts, and as such, you need to have that flexibility and that organisation behind you, really, that's helping you to be able to deliver these. And with Office 365 and with Microsoft Azure, I think you get that support. I think they've got a really good product set around it, and also some really good tools at a really good price. So I think at the moment that's probably one of the companies that's having the biggest impact. So what mobile apps do I use every day? Well, there's Outlook, obviously, because I think we're still in this area where email is quite prevalent. Keeping in contact with people is an essential thing, so being able to have my contacts there and the calendaring, etc. I mean, I live and die by my calendar, because you've probably heard it said before, if it isn't in the diary it doesn't get done, and I'm a very firm believer of managing my diary in such a way. So to me, Outlook is a real necessary tool. I think also Skype for Business is a really good tool. I think that really helps me being able to communicate with other organisations and people within the organisations I'm working with, to really make sure we're kind of communicating the right way, because communication is always one of those things that comes up on every lessons learned exercise. So I think the more we can communicate, the better. I think outside my own personal role, there's a number of different tools that I find really helpful and useful. So for instance, I like Feedly. It kind of helps me stay up to date by aggregating lots of different blogs and data feeds and news feeds into one good location so that I can consume it as I'm on the go and doing whatever I'm doing. I also find Facebook is starting to come into its own when you communicate with people outside your organisation. I'm also finding it's starting to get to the point now where you can actually have more business related conversations on Facebook. It's not just all about what your best friends had for dinner and how the dog's looking. I'm also finding that people are now starting to get more used to things like LinkedIn. So I find LinkedIn starting to become a really good tool as well for communicating and keeping in touch with people. Okay, so 3 skills that I think an aspiring technical leader should look to develop would include, I think selling and public speaking have to be a must, because you may not think you are in sales, but the reality is you are, because you need to get your idea across. You need to get your team on board, your industry, your suppliers, etc. So they need to be listening to what you have to say, and you need to be able to have an influence on them to get them to change their mind of what they're thinking at this point in time. You need to almost get them to see the utopian view and really move towards it. So being able to get them on board and be able to do what you can to be able to see what's in your mind and project it out, I think is one of the most key important things to do. I think the second thing is developing great leadership skills. So, and this builds on a whole variety of different approaches. So it's not just the normal traditional coaching or management skills that you need to look at. Because I find that most workforces are changing, that they're not just having in-house members of staff anymore, but they're having a collection of all sorts. They're having people that's like contractors or consultants or other third parties. You're finding that there's little bits of outsourcing, little bits of insourcing, and having to manage that kind of world where you don't just have everybody sat in the same office. Everybody doesn't just work for the same company, but they're all trying to challenge to go in the same direction to achieve the same goals, I think is really important. So having that great leadership skills, I think is key. And it always reminds me of Peter Drucker when he said, manage to do things right, but leaders do the right thing. And I think a third one, and this one I find that actually a lot of leaders or people that are high up inside their own roles in their own niche areas kind of forget about it sometimes, and that is really to work on yourself, your own personal development skills, and not only to work on them but to diversify them, because in today's world what we're finding is we get more and more different bits of technology, more ideas, more ways of working, and all these different ways are all building blocks, and it's how you put those building blocks together that create something new. So if you look at things like the iPhone, for instance, the iPhone doesn't have a lot of fantastic new technology in it. What it is, it's an amalgam of a number of great bits of technology. So Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. Apple did not invent the digital phone. But by combining all these different pieces together, they've created something that actually changed the world 10 years ago. So kind of really thinking about it, if you are really trying to be a technology leader, you need to be working out how you're going to pull all the bits together so that you can change the world. So for me, when I'm looking for trusted information or inspiration of what we should be doing next, then I really reach out to my network of peers. I am really lucky to know and trust a number of really respected people, and in fact I consider most of these people my friends rather than my colleagues. And you have to be careful, especially when you're using things like the internet for information, because the internet is very much a one-dimensional source. So you need to look around and really round off your viewpoint and do some fact-checking before you do make any moves if you do look at the internet for information. So for me, I would tend to use my friends list first, maybe look at Feedly, see what's available on things like the Information Age or the Economist or HBR, Business Insider, etc. And for me, that tends to be a really good way of being able to find information. I tend to scavenge around about 2,500, 3,000 RSS feeds at any one point in time, which again really helps to give me more of a rounded view of what's going on. Okay, what books? Okay, So I'm not going to give you the traditional ones because I think everybody will come out with the same ones over and over again. I think it's like anything where you've got a really good technical base, a real technical skill set, and those technical skills is where everyone tends to lean towards. So for me, what I'd probably recommend is probably something slightly more left field. So for instance, have a look at the Sparks Blueprint to Marketing for Local Trades. This will give you a really interesting viewpoint actually of how you can do marketing and sales locally within your organisation, because these skills are not necessarily just for dealing with people that are within your local vicinity as an electrician. If you look at the skills and you deal with them correctly, you can actually utilise a lot of these techniques in being able to improve the communication within your own organisation for a fraction of the cost as what you can imagine trying to get something done in a large scale fashion. The other one that I'd recommend is Outliers, so The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell. That's a brilliant book. It really is, and it just goes to show that not everybody is going to specifically make it, even if you've got the skills, and those people that you don't think have the skills can do. So it gives you a real infusion to just go out there and do something new, do something different, realise that you have the opportunity because you are you know, and there's nobody like you in the entire world, so that means you have the opportunity to shine. And the last one would be my own book. It's a bit of a blatant plug, but the Digital Transformation book, The Significant 7 Imperatives for Successfully Delivering Change in Complex IT Projects. This is a really good practical book about how to give you some insights on how to improve your business through digital technology, and how to make sure that digital technology is implemented successfully.